welcome everybody. Okay, how's everybody doing? Good. Okay, so we've been celebrating the life and times of Marion Hargrove. We had a 3-part series. A couple of weeks ago, Glenn Williams talked about his life, and last week we watched the movie See Your Private Hargrove. So tonight we're going to hear about the times of Marion. So while we all know about his wonderful writing career in Hollywood, these letters really show who Marion truly was. He was funny, he was sarcastic, he was super intelligent, and a fantastic writer, not only for Hollywood, but in his everyday correspondence with friends, family, and work colleagues. And he loved Mount Olive, he loved his family, and he loved the people here, and he never forgot where he came from. So tonight, I would like to thank Jean, Connie, Karen, Tamara, Matt, Lauren, and Anna for reading these fantastic letters. So I'm gonna have Jean come up first and bring Marion's words to life. So thank you.
Good evening. To Miss Barbara Hookall, 572 Pennsylvania Avenue, Brooklyn 7, New York, 6 May 1944. Dear Mrs. Hookall, thank you for sending the copy of the Liberty Bill with your interview in it. It was a very good story, even after your editors and printers got through with it. Personally, I have found it best to overlook both these forms of humanity. If editors could write, they'd be writers. And if printers could read, they would probably take honest jobs. Cordially yours, Sergeant Marion Hargrove, Assistant Feature Editor. To Lieutenant Donald Bishop, 26th Company, 5th Battalion, 3rd STR, the Infantry School, Fort Benning, Georgia, 17 June 1944. Dear Don, it was very nice hearing from you, but where the hell have you been for the past 2 years? Pat told me about your bust-up when I looked her up at Scribner's a few days after I got back. She was apparently busy as hell, running around the place like on possessed, and as I remember the occasion, that was her only statement. Hello, good to see you. Don and I are separating. Nice to have seen you. The last rumor I heard about Good Winkle had him in Tunisia. It is good to hear that he is in Russia, except that I wish the information came from some source a little more reliable than Captain Flynn. The last I heard of Flynn was a picture from Steve Hannigan showing Flynn, quote, Hargrove's old artillery officer, unquote, teaching Robert Walker the use of the Winchester carbine, I believe, quote, as he taught it to Hargrove, unquote. I think I have a print of this around somewhere, and if I can find it, I'll send it on to you. You should show it to your grandchildren. Mulvihill was looking exceedingly spruce when he was here for the New York opening of the picture. He had lost his contact lenses, or pawned them, but was apparently happy. He spent the better part of a week impressing the Manhattan yokels at all the more expensive and fashionable saloons. He talked quite grippingly about the danger and the excitement of his work as an Air Force intelligence officer. But from all I could gather, this consists chiefly of sending dispatches to the hometown papers telling who was visiting at the guest house. Yeah. McCarthy has been awarded the Legion of Merit by the President, and a bunch of us went out to the Governor's Island yesterday to see the medal pinned on at a very high church ceremonial. From what you tell me of your infantry training, I believe he is again ahead of you in the matter of expanding waistlines. Please let me hear from you again, and much more frequently. Allison sends her regards. Very sincerely yours, Sergeant Marion Hargrove, Feature Editor. Apparently somebody got promoted. To Corporal George Barrett, room 704, Mr. Eden and Grand Concourse, Bronx, New York, 5 August 1944. Wretch, in my usual benevolent and kind-hearted way, I've been setting aside a portion of each overlaid day to thinking of our poor mail call editor, stretched on a bed of pain in the Bronx. My thoughts were filled with commiseration and sympathy. That was before the important work of this department began to be interrupted almost hourly with these asinine letters of yours. Apparently, the business of correspondence has become so powerful a habit in your sordid and colorless life that even the loss of your 12 secretaries cannot keep you from it. Apparently, also, even the stretch in the bronx with whooping cough, or with it croup or colic, can keep you from the 12 secretaries. You just can't stop bothering my girls, can you? As I have explained to you patiently on several occasions, I'm a man of vast tolerance and understanding, with a fraternal regard for even the least member of my command. From Miss Canning all the way down to the mail call editor, anybody can expect from me compassion and kindly treatment. Of course, the various members of this department have been too much overcome by shyness and regard for my inherent modesty to tell me this, but I feel sure that deep in all their hearts, they love me and know me for the great and good man that I am. This sometimes astonishing benevolence of mine is sometimes greatly strained by the childishness and thoughtlessness of some few of the creatures who live and work beneath my sheltering wing. At times, I am slightly vexed by the churlish ingratitude shown in the whistling, catcalling, and labial gymnastics which are hurled at my exalted position from the bottom of the stack. Mind you, I don't object to an occasional cry of lecher, heathen, monster, or hillbilly bouncing out from that intellectual latrine to my right. Thrown 3 or 4 times a day when my back is turned, I am too busy to put you in your place, which place, to my mind, is the infantry. They are bearable. But when the offending members of the department turn them from a bed in the Bronx where they are lying on their fattened backsides for an extended ride on the sick book, this passes the limits of official sufferance. In order to keep you out of mischief and our prodigious secretaries busy with their own letters rather than yours, I've instructed your replacement and intellectual superior, technician 5th grade, Novak, to bundle up all the incoming letters twice a day and ship them all up to you. Corporal McComber will make a special trip at the end of each afternoon to pick up the work you have done. Your typewriter, on which you will write all of your outgoing letters yourself, should reach you late Monday afternoon, and the first batch of letters should come in on Tuesday morning. Corporal McComber will come up on Tuesday afternoon, and if he does not bring back half his own weight in finished work, I will come on Wednesday morning. You have, if you have any time left over from all this, time which you would use to inflict your lewd and vapid commentaries on that pure and pristine pearl of great price, Mrs. Schlepperman, I think we can arrange to have you do the shoulder patch and massage center letters on the side. Schmiel, yours with a slightly sneering tolerance, Sergeant Hargrove, feature editor.
To Lieutenant Don Bishop, Public Relations Office, the Infantry School, Fort Benning, Georgia, dated 8 August 1944. Dear Don, it is only with supreme effort that I find myself able to write to you again, since I feel that you have sunk as low in the anthropological scale as a man can possibly go. You have pushed aside all of your memory, all of your pride, and all recognition of contemporary standards of decency, and you have become a damn public relations officer. I told Joe McCarthy about this, and Joe says that you always did have a mean look in your eye. We are both terribly broken up about your disgrace and hope that you will ultimately turn back upon the right path in a finer and better civilian world. I was in Mount Olive about a month ago and ran into Helen Cavness while I was there. She was looking very good, albeit she was being towed about and buffeted by a 2-year-old little monster who was a spit and image of J. Paul himself. As a result of that meeting, I received a letter a couple of weeks ago from J. Paul, who was beating the ground and moaning. I gathered from his letter that he does not like the Army so much as a private as he did when he was a plain, dirty newspaperman with his feet on the desk of a commanding general. I don't think I need to tell you how much his suffering meant to my flagging morale. Ain't it wonderful? About the piece of whimsy you sent to me through BPR. I don't remember having seen it as such, but then I get at least 100 contributions, even on the dullest days, and seldom even look at the names or addresses on them. I don't remember anything at all about the Lone Snagga business, and I suppose it is still winding its way through the tortuous channels of BPR. That's probably base public relations. If you run across anything else good, I would suggest that you stick it in an envelope and mail it directly to me. Technically, I believe post or organizational PRO, Public Relations Office, is all the clearance a contribution needs, and practically all of our contributions come to us with absolutely no clearance at all. Please let me hear from you more often. For Christ's sweet sake, Allison sends her best regards. Yours, more in pain than in anger, Sergeant Marion Hargrove, feature editor.
Okay, this is dated 11 August 1944. To H.E. Rudy Braun, by decree of the High Lama and the consent of the people of the Hargrovian School of Philosophy, Apostle, and elder of the council, Grand Salamer to the Lama and right hand of the prophet, posing currently as Lieutenant James E. Braun, AAF, in transit to Depot 2, 124, Tacoma Avenue South, Tacoma, Washington. Dear cousin, where in the hell's name did you pop up from? The last time I saw you, you were a civilian sitting in the Carolina sweet shop, eating cornbread and buttermilk. Weren't you happy there? Didn't you like being a civilian? God forbid you should have been yanked into the army without joining the government and becoming a lieutenant, I suppose. Jesus, what this mad younger generation will do for a little excitement. As for the Hargrovian School of Philosophy, I am happy to report that it is still there and that your position as Salamer to the Lama is still intact. The old organization is pretty well shot to hell by the war, though. What with the Kapellmeister, an ensign in the damn Navy, the poet laureate, a full-blown mother, and all the titular generalissimos, tech sergeants, while the old man himself is still a buck. Things would be a hell of a lot different if the universal and infallible High Lama himself were running this damn war. That's where you come in with the ritual response, ain't it a fact? I'm universal and infallible. Ain't it a damn fact? I must semi-officially reprimand you, however, cousin, for associating the UIHL with childish escapades concerning freight elevators. Please let me hear from you often, child, and please keep a civil tongue in your damn head. Yours with pontifical noblesse oblige, H.E.H. Marion Hargrove, by authority of the creed and the consent of his people of the Hargrovian School of Philosophy, founder, teacher, definer of the creed, scourge of the wicked, and defender of the downtrodden, universal and infallible High Lama.
First Sergeant Arthur Stein, 317 West 51 Terrace, Kansas City, Missouri, dated 7 October 1944. Dear USO Commando, how the hell did they happen to let you into this country? And now that you are in the country, what the hell do you propose to do about it? Don't mumble. All I can say is that this country is getting into a hell of a shape. Battling Bob, Private Robert W. Beam that is out in Colorado Springs, impressing the rookies by beating his gums about his experiences as Chief of Staff of the 14th Air Force. Practically the whole damn roundup staff is wandering around New York at this very moment. The cartoonist Nolan with a job on Newsmap and a bride of 5 days standing. Norman Soon is wandering all over the country in civilian clothes. Everybody is in the States lousing up the joint. Who's next? Lieutenant Colonel Pierre? I am happy to say that all things are going well at the Hacienda Hargrove, except that Mrs. H has become a rabid politician and makes re-elect Roosevelt speeches at Carnegie Hall, jeopardizing life, limb, and Army career of the undersigned. I consider all of this scandalous, especially in view of the fact that Mrs. H is 5 months gone with triplets. About the possibility of getting you fixed for life with a cushy job on Yank, I would like very much to see you as first sergeant of this raunchy outfit, since there is nothing better I like than a first sergeant in whom I have still instilled the fear of God and a wholesome respect for my ability and high character. However, no one is eligible for a job on the administrative end of Yank until he has spent a good portion of his life in a poultry yard with spade and bucket, improving his personality. There are innumerable veterans of the 4th Air Force who will attribute these characters to you, baby boy, but you haven't seen any chicken yet until you've seen some of the ones we have around here. I hope you will be able to get to New York, temporarily or permanently, by fair means or foul, in fair or rainy weather, for better or for worse. The bottle of scotch is still waiting for you on the top shelf of our closet. Please give my regards to the family. Yours patiently, Marion Hargrove.
PFC Gladys Brooks, Women's Reserve Battalion, Quantico, Virginia, 28 October 1944. Dear Private Brooks, thank you for your very nice letter of October 26th. I should be delighted to see you some weekend if we can work out the problem of time. I can be found at this office until 5:15 every Saturday. For the weekend itself, I always go into hiding and sometimes even my wife can't find me. Very sincerely yours, Sergeant Marion Hargrove, feature editor.
To Walt McLean Spring Area Service Club, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 5th of January, 1945. Dear Walt, thank you for your letter. It was damn good to hear from you after such a long time. The first thing I noticed about the letter was the return address. Brother, if you hang around the Spring Area Service Club much longer, they'll be listing you amongst the equipment they take in inventory. I'm glad to hear you like your job though, and I hope you'll be able to keep it until you turn it in for a civilian time card and a complete blue serge uniform with a draped shape and a rest pleat. McCarthy is in France now and should be overseas for 2 or 3 months more. He took off several months ago on a roving assignment through Europe so that he wouldn't get too rusty in that reinforced swivel chair of his. He was in Italy for a while and then he went to Greece and was the first American enlisted man to go to Athens. He got to Athens 2 days after the Germans left and 2 days before the British arrived. Then he spent a little more time in Italy and went to France. So far as I know, he has spent some time on the Western Front and is now temporarily managing the Paris Bureau of Yank so that the regular bureau chief there could get in a little time at the front himself. He probably will spend some time in the London bureau before coming back to strain his swivel chair again. He did a hell of a swell piece on Athens, and I'm ashamed of you for not having seen it. God forbid that you should read the best 5-cent magazine on the market, I suppose. Mulvihill got himself married off all right, but it beats the hell out of me how he managed to get through the routine. The whole business was altogether as hectic and confused as most of Mulvihill's projects usually are, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear that he had not found a priest until 2 hours before the ceremony. He is now stationed at Mitchell Field out in Long Island and will probably be shipping out overseas before very long. As for myself, I suppose I could say that life is still being good to me. I'm still here after being back from overseas for a year, and I have what is to me the best job in the Army. I'm developing a broad behind from sitting at a desk all day and a nervous gut from overwork, but what the hell, I'm happy. In another month or so, I expect to have another mouth to feed, so my cup runneth over. I wish I could be encouraging on your getting on Yank as Harlem correspondent, but I am afraid there ain't a ghost of a chance. We don't even have a correspondent for Brooklyn. Please let me hear from you more often and let me know how you're making out in all of your assorted big deals. Very sincerely yours, Sergeant Marion Hargrove, feature editor. To Private Manley J. Blevins, Thayer General Hospital, Nashville, Tennessee, January 5th, 1945. Dear Private Blevins, thank you for your letter of December 24th, which I waited this long to answer because it made me a little hot when I first read it and I wanted to cool off before writing to you.
I hate to see the bitterness which you show in your letter, but I feel that most of it is caused by misunderstanding. By your inferring that the motion picture made from my book is insulting to all public relations men. I cannot believe that any slur on public relations was intended by the man who wrote the scenario, and I know that I myself have made no criticism of public relations, since practically all of my time since I finished basic training has been spent in public relations or similar work here and overseas. As for your mention of Johnny Buscemi and the others who have died in this work, Buscemi was my closest friend in the Army, and I hold very deep regard from him from the time we left basic training and went into Army public relations work together as a team. I have every respect for him and for the combat public relations men of this war. The Hollywood version of my book, a production in which I had no part, since I was overseas from before the time it was written until after it was finished, used a post-public relations office as a convenient symbol for a comfortable stateside home in the Army. In all probability, they chose to post public relations rather than some other garrison job because I myself had gone from basic into public relations and had fitted in with the character they had written for the title role. After the picture was released, Yank received 2 or 3 letters from here and overseas saying that the movie was an unnecessary slam at every man in Army public relations. We ran one of the letters on the mail call page with a note below saying Sergeant Hargrove agrees. Since I had no connection with the movie, beyond that of having supplied the title and the book on which the scenario was rather flimsily based, there was mothering more that I could do. As for my writing and capitalizing on the war, I feel that this too is a misconception. Practically all of my book was written before the war started, and I have done almost no outside writing since the war began. I'm very sorry for your misunderstanding and hope that this letter will go a part of the way to clearing it up. Very sincerely yours, Sergeant Marion Hargrove. Mrs. Thomas Crow, 524 Hawthorne Lane, Charlotte, North Carolina, 1st of March, 1945. Dear Mrs. Crow, it turned out to be a boy, a sickly-looking little specimen of only 11.5 pounds, and I have never seen an uglier little bruiser in all of my life. Allison is coming along splendidly and has a look of intense relief on her face. Very sincerely yours, Sergeant Marion Hargrove, feature editor.
Somewhere in Luzon, July 11th, 1945. Dear Barry, thank you for your letter, which was a long time in finding me. I'd like to do a forward to the chain of command. I think I'd get a lot of fun and satisfaction out of doing it, and I'd jump at the idea if I were still in the States. While I'm out here, though, I don't think the thing would be feasible. If I were to do the forward out here, it would have to be approved in slow fashion by the Yank officer in Manila, then by the theater PRO, then by the GHQ's PRO, then sent to New York for approval by the managing editor of Yank and the officer in charge of Yank, then by the colonel in charge of the Army Information Branch, then by the general in charge of the Information and Education Division, and finally by the Bureau of Public Relations. None of these oracles is bubbling over with humor. And all of them are channels and necessarily slow as hell. God alone knows how long the clearance would take, whether all of them would okay the forward, or if all of them approved it, how much of it would be hacked out along the line. You might wait months for the thing and then not get it. I don't think it's worth the wait. The story is beautiful and should be a terrific seller. My hutmates read it last night and all of them almost wept at the beauty of the thing. It is, to my mind, a complete picture of the workings of the Army, masterfully done. And I wish to God I had read it myself in your very words. To Marion's mother-in-law, South Mountain Road, New York City, New York, August 20th, 1945. Dear Marie, apparently God's in his heaven and it's all's right with the world again. It's very hard to realize that I'm back home after less than 5 months and that I don't have to worry anymore about the possibility of being sent overseas again. And it's almost impossible to realize that by this time next week, I'll be a civilian. I can't even remember or picture what it's like not to be in the Army. It's wonderful to be back, especially under these conditions. The country is beautiful, although nothing like what it must be in Vermont. The leaves are as gorgeous as they could possibly be, not being Ames Hill leaves, and the weather seems to have been especially ordered for the occasion, warm and sunny and very pleasant. Christopher spends a lot of time in his pen outside the dining room windows, and occasionally we get out his new sit-up buggy and go pedaling off to visit the neighbors. The family seems to be in marvelous shape. Allison is looking a little thin, but very beautiful. Christopher is fantastically full of good health, good spirits, and mischief. He has found a new trick with which to show off, jumping up and down and panting and crowing. He has also struck up a very warm friendship with Betsy Brew's dog, a huge, gentle old nursemaid of a creature, an English sheepdog. I believe, and they have a marvelous time together when he and I wheel over to Betsy's for tea. He is a wonderful baby. Marie, pleasant and unspoiled, and I'm happy to see that he gets his disposition from you and Allison. I don't think he would have stood two of me in the house yet. It's nice having the Andersons' house while we're waiting for Hargrove's Folly up the road to be finished, but it's not like being in your own place. I miss my books and phonograph records, and there are surprisingly few out here. The house is coming along beautifully, though. The stonework is all finished now. Practically all the windows are in. The gorgeous staircase was put up yesterday. And the insulation will begin for the ground floor next week when they finish installing the wiring. We're expecting to be able to move in right after Christmas. I'm still on furlough, but I go back to the office on the 24th and out to Governor's Island on the 25th to be discharged. Allison and I thought of going to Guatemala for a month or 6 weeks, but Carl Herrick checked on the banana boats and reported that all of the fruit lines, even the Norwegian, will be tied up with troop transportation for at least 2 or 3 months, so I suppose that's out. It was very thoughtful of you to disappear from my homecoming, although a little unnecessary considering the size of the house here, and the whole week was gone by without any indication of when you plan to come back. I can understand you wanted to be on Ames Hill now when the leaves are turning, but I hope to God you're not planning to spend the whole winter up in the woods snowed in. Alice and I would be delighted if we could talk you into spending the winter here, where the blizzards are milder and you don't have to walk 12 miles for the sight of another human face. And I'm sure you enjoy it, especially watching the house take shape and helping to set broken arms and legs for this hellion of a grandson you have. Why don't you come down? We'd all three love having you here whenever you decide you can come. Let us hear from you, okay? Marion. New York City, New York, April 22nd, 1946. Gentlemen, I'm afraid that in my appearance before you earlier this month, I did not make completely clear what I meant in my suggestion of a Bill of Rights for enlisted personnel of the Army. This Bill of Rights, as I see it, would clearly outline the basic rights already belonging to the enlisted men, such as safeguards he is given in court-martial and company discipline by the Articles of War. Extend to him broader rights and point out to him what privileges legally or by custom belong to his officers. The whole thing would be a statement of War Department policy on the relationship between officer and enlisted men, and would primarily be a statement of basic principles rather than of specific matters. It should lay down in single and unambiguous language a definition of this relationship, emphasizing the military and disciplinary power of the officer and flatly negating any idea of a social difference. As to the specifics which the statement might contain, it could very well outline and validate certain rights for the enlisted man, which now exist in the theory throughout the Army and in practice only under a benevolent command. Right, whose only backing at this point is the customs and usages of the service. For example, according to the customs of the service, when a man is transferred to another organization at the specific request of the officer to whose command or office he is being transferred, that officer is expected to advance the man one grade. If the man is being transferred at his own request, he has no real right to keep his stripes. A policy for this sort of thing should be standardized and set forth in the Bill of Rights I suggest. Basic rights should be granted and made clear to the enlisted man now, has legally or by custom, should be set forth and the knowledge of them made easily available to every man in the Army. I would recommend that a copy of this Bill of Rights be permanently posted in every orderly room and every mess hall in the Army to serve as a guide for the officers as well as the men. It would give every man a feeling of security with a definite knowledge of where he stands in the Army, where his officers stand in relation to him. It would deprive petty and stupid officers of the power to make and administer their own personal laws, and would do much to make Army discipline a matter of broad policy, clearly defined, than a personal whim. My second suggestion is the need for improvement in the selection of promotion of officers. If we are to maintain a larger Army than we have had in the normal times thus far, I feel that the military academy at West Point should be abolished, and that it should be augmented by other academies of equal rank and quality throughout the Army, giving all officers equal training and ridding us of the childish West Point tradition, which has it that a senator's blessing and a 4-year stretch at West Point makes a man socially and anthropologically superior to his fellows. The training of our officers should concern itself much more with the tactics and technique of warfare and the technique of discipline, rather than with the stately traditions of an Army still too young to have such traditions. West Point should be conducted as a school of leadership rather than as a movie lot for Warner Brothers. Promotion also, both for officers and enlisted men, should be based on competitive examination rather than on seniority and, in too many cases, favoritism. It should be as simple and easy to demote an incompetent officer as it is to demote a non-commissioned officer, and it should conversely be as difficult to break the latter as it now is to reclassify the former. I have seen an extremely competent old staff sergeant broken to private because a general saw him chewing gum. And I've seen a lieutenant colonel who screwed things up from hell to breakfast, transferred and made colonels just to get them out of the way. This should not be. The present court-martial system is bad and need a reform, and probably should be completely overhauled to make it fair and just as civil courts are supposed to be. Too often our military courts are used as implements of terror, and too often a man who has committed a minor offense is given a staggering sentence as an example to others. I believe that jury trials should be instituted, and that where enlisted men are being tried, enlisted men should serve on the jury. They should also be fairly standard punishments for all offenses, to dispense with the present frivolously light sentences for officers and justly harsh sentences for enlisted men. It should also be made clear to every commander that court-martials in his command are not subject to his whims, and they are not to be tampered with. I feel that officers' clubs should be continued, but that the officers' club of any organization should not have facilities that are denied service to the clubs of the same organization. This would apply especially to the serving of liquor. If liquor is to be sold or drunk by the officers, there is no reason why it should not be available in their own clubs to the other men. The large section in post-motion picture houses for officers and their wives and families should be dispensed with altogether, or cut down to one row or so for the most exalted officers of the organizations. If there are to be reserved seats in the theater, let them be reserved for the performance by the officer or enlisted man who wants to reserve a seat or two. I do not favor the abolition of the hand salute, which is to my mind is a very valuable military and disciplinary service, but I feel that the United States and its use should be confined to military posts, and that in overseas theaters, especially in zones of occupation, it should be used as a matter of theater policy. There's much room for improvement in the Corps of Military Police, most of which should be accomplished by closer attention to the selection and training of personnel, a weeding out of psychopaths, and a greater importance attached to intelligence. As it is now, I believe any person of intelligence and emotional balance in the military police feels a necessity to explain to people how he happens to be in the Corps. This is, to my mind, the most archaic single department of our Army. There is no reason why it should not be one of the best. As a guarantee for all democratic innovations in the Army, I would commend a larger Inspector General's Department with inspectors responsible for only the IGD, and with the IG responsible only to the Secretary of War or to the President. Very sincerely yours, Marion Hargrove.
I like a microphone. This next group of letters was anthologized in Playboy, actually. So it's a whole group of letters. Following the overwhelming success of his 1942 bestseller, See Here, Private Hargrove, Marion Hargrove found himself hard put to follow up his initial good fortune. For the first 2 years after the war, he recalls, I couldn't write a thing. It was the old story about facing the blank piece of paper in the typewriter and being unable to get an idea. But then the words began to flow again, producing several novels, including Something's Gotta Give and The Girl I Left Behind. Hargrove subsequently became a writer for TV, Maverick, 77 Sunset Strip, and motion pictures, out of which experience came the following battle cry of a vertical screenwriter, "My kingdom for a couch." Hollywood executives say that vertical or sitting up writing is a bugaboo invented by screenwriters who pretend that their work suffers unless they are allowed to do their thinking lying down. The following dossier was removed by Mr. Hargrove from the confidential files of William T. Orr, executive producer, Warner Brothers TV. All of the letters and memoranda, Mr. Hargrove informs us, are believed to have come from the same typewriter, an ancient model, such as is usually palmed off on scriptwriters. The few longhand missives show marked similarities in their calligraphy. 2, Mr. William T. Orr, from Marion Hargrove. Subject, New Directions in Contemporary Writing. Reverend and Dear Sir, I have been grievously concerned by recent complaints that my writing is becoming increasingly vertical. In the language of the layman, this means that it goes rigidly down toward the bottom of the page without ever noticeably broadening out. I am stunned by the charge, but unhappily unable to refute it. Vertical writing is a serious matter up with which we cannot put. It is a disease that must be treated as soon as it becomes apparent. This department is bending every effort to remedy the situation, to restore its output to a broad horizontal basis, but it cannot be adequately or permanently remedied unless we strike at its very roots. The bald fact, sir, is this: horizontal writing cannot be achieved except by a horizontal writer. Further, a writer cannot be considered as adequately and productively horizontal on a desktop or on cold linoleum. Various secondary officials of our little organization have made conscientious and valiant efforts to stamp out creeping verticality by procuring for the writer that indispensable tool of his trade, a couch. It is the writer's understanding that the undertaking has been given the sanction of your office, but has been tied up in committee somewhere down the line, most likely by the people who actually schlep the furniture around. Whilst I am reluctant, even in a matter of such pith and moment, to use the nasty word influence, I should appreciate any weight you might see fit to throw in the direction of getting me this traditional prerequisite of my profession. In the almost immortal words of one of my British colleagues, give us the tools and we will do the work. Marion Hargrove. Mr. William T. Orr, Warner Brothers Television, 4000 Warner Boulevard, Burbank, California. Dear Major Studio Executive, is your operation functioning at peak efficiency? Are all the members of your team giving things the full pull? Or are you slowed down by the tired, sluggish feeling that comes of working with vertical scripts? Independent laboratory tests reveal that horizontal writing cannot be achieved by vertical writers. In a fortunately dwindling number of script factories, the writers are still hampered by tired blood which is plumb worn out from working its way up to the writer's head. Modern medical science knows but one remedy for this. Let the writer lie down from time to time so that the blood can flow sideways. Try the genuine lath and plaster test. Knock on the wall. If your writer knocks right back at you, that's a sure sign that he is vertical. If he is vertical, you can be sure that you are losing valuable man hours. Give him the sofa that nature requires, and you give him that extra surge of power. You give him the opportunity to give you horizontal writing. Lean back and enjoy that big studio feeling. Yours very truly, 5 New York doctors, Rivkin, Ravkin, Riskin, Ruskin, and Briskin. To Mr. William T. Orr, from Mr. Roy Huggins. I had to look him up. He was the creator of Maverick. Subject, deplorable conditions. Dear Bill, I can't sleep at night for thinking of poor old Hargrove sitting in his office all day long, day after day, bolt upright, when he should be lying down thinking. You know how quiet and uncomplaining he is, and how patient. You know, as well as I, that he would sit in there suffering in silence, like some noble beast, without ever saying a word about the pain in his heart and the fatigue in his backside. He could never bring himself to ask us for the couch he so badly wants and needs. I am a producer, yes, but I still have a heart. And it is slowly tearing my heart out, having to watch the daily disintegration of this first-class writing machine, just for the lack of a couch. All of his get up and go seems to have got up and gone. Let us restore it to him before it is too late. Besides, I'm getting tired of him handing me nothing but his damn vertical writing. Roy Huggins. To Mr. William T. Orr, from Miss Mary Jane Perkins. Dear Mr. Orr, sir, I am but a poor secretary, working for a poor writer, but I have my feelings, just like you people who have pads on your chairs. The gentleman I work for is Mr. Hargrove, who, as you know, is universally respected and loved by we common people. He is a good man, and he tries to do a good job, and he so wants to turn out first-class horizontal writing, like all them big $200 a week writers, who he is every bit as good as, or would be if he was given the chance. It is the most pitiful thing you could imagine to watch this poor man pining away, all for the lack of one of those crummy Warner Brothers sofas. What does $27.50 mean to a big corporation like you? Respectfully yours, Mary Jane Perkins. Moose Jaw, Nebraska. Dear Mr. William T. Orr, I watch Maverick every week, and even when it's a cowboy story. My favorite is James Garner, and of course my favorite writer is Marion Hargrove, just like everybody else, I guess. He sure can rip. But tell me, Mr. Orr, how come it is that just lately it seems his writing is so damn vertical? Maybe you've got him working without a couch. Please tell me this is not so. Yours truly, Myrtle Kleinfelter. A reminder, block printed in red crayon, found attached with Scotch tape to Mr. Orr's toilet seat. Things to do today. Arrange for Hargrove's couch. To Mr. William T. Orr, from Miss Joanna Barnes. I looked her up as well. She was an actress on some episodes of Maverick. In the face of mounting unemployment, SAG requests you aid its members in seeking employment. Please supply regulation casting couch in office of Marion Hargrove. Thanks awfully, Joanna Barnes. To Mr. William T. Orr, from Mr. E.L. D. Patee, subject, shortage of space. The warehouse people are complaining that they are up to their ass in sofas. Is there some way we could dispose of some of them? E.L. D. Patee. To William T. Orr, from Mr. J.L. Warner, subject, morale. I'd feel a lot better if we could find a couch somewhere for Mr. Hargrove, Chief. New York ABC Burbank, attention Gamson. Winchell's column this morning says Hargrove working at Warner's without couch. Please check soonest and for Christ's sake remedy if true. Have you people never heard of public opinion? Cordially, Goldenson. To Mr. William T. Orr, from Mr. Marion Hargrove, subject, personal. Dear Bill, how very sweet of you. Your lovely surprise arrived a few minutes ago in the middle of a very busy day, and everyone is so excited and thrilled about it that we are not even going to try to get any more work done this week. It is a very lovely gift and a perfect fit. How could you have known that it was a couch that I wanted more than anything in the world? Your true friend, Marion Hargrove. P.S. I don't suppose they have any tables around that I could put my ashtrays on? I know, isn't that, it's so funny. All right, I've got one more letter, dated March 27th, 1993, to Mrs. John Wilkins, 109 Journey Street, Mount Olive, North Carolina. Dear Miss Eva, I was genuinely thrilled to see your picture in the Mount Olive Tribune, along with your debonair canine companion, and the news that you are now, quote, 95 and still going strong. When I saw the words Mrs. Wilkins under the picture, I knew immediately which Mrs. Wilkins you simply had to be, because you looked like that Mrs. Wilkins should look, something very special. Specifically, you looked like Mrs. Dr. John Wilkins of Mount Olive, North Carolina, which to me is about as special as anybody could possibly be. Yeah. I get a little teary with this one. When I was a small boy living in Mount Olive, and when Mr. Coolidge was president, your husband was a hero to me and larger than life, like my other hero, my grandfather, Christopher Columbus Lum Jernigan. Dr. Wilkins was my oldest friend and had been since several months before my birth, an occasion at which I am happy to report that he officiated. That was October 13th, 1919. The following year, he delivered my Uncle James Wilkins Jernigan, and in succeeding years, 5 of my 6 younger brothers and sisters. My sister Cheryl would have been happy to join the group, but she was not born until we were living in Wilson. My mother, Emma Jernigan Hargrove, spoke highly of Dr. Wilkins as long as she lived, which was until January 1964. Mind you, she had nothing against Dr. Henderson. The latter was a fine man and a good doctor, she said, but had a tendency to sit up until all hours of the night playing poker, and my father was one of those who had no objection to sitting up playing poker with him. I cannot vouch for the authenticity of this scandalous allegation and have privately suspected that it was merely typical small-town gossip, or shall we say, old wives' tales. At any rate, he was not Dr. Wilkins, and nothing could be done about that. My grandfather and grandmother Jernigan lived at what was then 104 East Main Street at the corner of Jefferson, directly across Main Street. Between the street and the big ditch below the cemetery, there was a triangular piece of ground that served as my grandfather's roasting ear patch. He had an insatiable love for gardening, and as I recall, the only time he ever had his picture in the paper was early one spring when the Tribune photographed him and his hoe among his corn, which was already as tall as he was, which I would say was in the immediate vicinity of 6 feet. In the fall of 1927, which is what I'm working my way around to, we were living in the house on Jefferson Street, directly behind my grandfather Jernigan's back garden. My Uncle James, my late brother Talmadge, and I, all of us born within a space of 17 months, were inseparable. My mother usually described us as hellions, though she was aware that I was a hellion and the other 2 were poor little lambs waiting to be led astray. The world was full of places to get into mischief. My grandfather's house, the area underneath it, the barn behind it, the big ditch, which was reputed to have crawfish in it, where it disappeared into a drain pipe going under Main Street, where the street turns to go up Hickory Nut Hill, but we never found any. And then, of course, beyond all that, the infinite variety and mystery of Maplewood Cemetery. Just across the ditch in the southeast corner of the cemetery was, and is, a lone grave completely covered with white marble, a boxy structure rising a foot or 2 off the ground with a substantial headstone and a low marble wall, maybe 3 or 4 inches high, forming a sort of shallow trough around the top of the structure. One day after school, when I was 8 years old, I remember the date as November 8th, 1927, and I was in Miss Minnie Cole's 3rd grade room at Mount Olive Elementary School. The 3 of us were playing in the graveyard when I discovered that the headstone in question was not permanently cemented to the top of the mausoleum itself. It was pinned to it, apparently by some sort of metal rod, and when you pushed at the top of it, well, it gave. It gave a very satisfactory metallic groan. It was an impressive sound and deserving of an encore. And I decided to try it from the other side, from a position inside the trough. I pushed it again, gently I thought, and got the same satisfying, mournful sound. The next thing I knew, the headstone was falling toward me, and I was scrambling to get out of its way. The edge of the trough must have taken some of the brunt of the fall, but my leg was caught under the headstone. Happily, I can't remember any of the details or any sensations. They must have been blocked out of my memory almost as soon as they happened. My brother streaked out for home, hollering, "Mama, Mama, Junior's cutting too right across here," indicating his waist. And James was well on his way to Mr. Charlie Britt's shop to pass the word to his father that I had been killed. I had not been killed. I had managed to pull my leg free, leaving a fearful gash above my right knee and a somewhat smaller one below it. And I had figured out what my mother would do if she was there. She would have hustled me to Dr. Wilkins. I managed to get to the road and flagged down a truck and was on my way to Dr. Wilkins' office, which, as I recall, was on Center Street, a couple of doors north of Lewis's drugstore. Dr. Wilkins, as I recall him, was always very kind and gentle, with a touch that was considerately light but sure, and an approach that usually said two things. At least to me it did. First, that the situation was serious, but not as bad as I probably thought. And second, that if he and I both put our best efforts to it, we would have things in fairly good running order in a reasonably short time. He must have anesthetized me, because the whole operation is a blank in my memory. Then he set to work with a needle and darned the two great holes in my leg. I think there were something like 30 large stitches above my knee, and I still have a great horseshoe-shaped scar there, and a much smaller, neater one below. Some of the stitches are still visible, 1.5 inches long, and I'm sure it must have looked to him as if he were endlessly basting a turkey. I woke late the next morning in bed at home, feeling rested and comfortable without a worry in my mind. It was my parents' bed, which was mine for the next 2 or 3 months, still without a care in the world. Thanks to the care of a splendid doctor and both of my parents and hordes of relatives and contemporaries, I was, in the words of William Cullen Bryant, sustained and soothed by an unfaltering trust. Good doctor, good patient. Those 2 or 3 months were the most momentous I have ever known, and they changed the whole course of my life. Most of the day there was nothing to do except sit or lie in bed, waiting for threads to rot and flesh to grow. So I read. I read every damn thing in the house. First there were newspapers, which I read the way Lum Jernigan read a newspaper, start to finish. And my father had a collection of little books about the size of a playing card and bound in imitation limp leather, each a short story, Poe, Sherlock Holmes, or a poem like the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. He also, my father that is, belonged to a Book of the Month club. I groped my way through Elizabeth Maddox Roberts' The Time of Man, and may very well have been the only 8-year-old boy to ever get through Giants in the Earth by Ole Edvard Rolvag. Instead of playing softball or kick the can, I became an omnivorous reader, and worse than that, an incurable writer. I never learned an honest trade, and seldom did an honest day's work, and have never really missed it. I blame all this on being at the right place at the right time and having the right doctor. We moved away from Mount Olive early in 1929, and for 65 years now, the memory of your husband and all he did for me has remained as warm and splendid as the light of the alpine sun lamp he used in the treatment of my pampered right leg. Every doctor I have known in the past 65 years has been measured against John Wilkins, MD, and seldom to their advantage. Thank you for reading this long-winded screed. It has been in the back of my mind for a long time. My salutations and best wishes to your children, especially the doctor, and to theirs. May you live to 120, still going strong. Cordially yours, Marion Hargrove. P.S. In case you're wondering, I got your address from Teddy Murray in Wilmington. She sat in front of me in Miss Eva Louise Flowers' room in the second grade. I know.
Dated March 10, 1997. Dear Miss Eva, I was talking on the phone with my good cousins Ed and Udell Jernigan, and Udell mentioned that Miss Eva Wilkins had just had a birthday. I've never been much at math, but I think I got it figured out that this must have been your 99th. In your case, that is not really astounding, but to me it is impressive nonetheless, since most of my own contemporaries suddenly seem to be in their late 80s at best, and with one or two exceptions, I am close to being my oldest living relative. It also seems to me that the older I get, the younger you get, which I suspect is all a part of nature's grand design. At any rate, let's keep in there pitching, and many happy returns on the day. And I'm taking the liberty of enclosing a modest token of my esteem in the form of a good improving book. And if you will recall, George Gogol used to say, you just can't hardly get them kind no more. To me, this little volume is redolent with the reminiscence of the shrill sing-song voices of mean little 8-year-old girls giving each other a hard time on the playground at Miss Mary E. Pitkin's Mount Olive Elementary School in the middle 1920s. And I'm pretty sure that much the same was prevalent in the gracious days of Teddy Roosevelt. If, however, you find that you already have the book, or already know everything that's in it, you might consider passing it on to some deserving little smart-aleck girl, or to the nice new public library. Time, as the fellow said, marches on. My oldest son, Christopher, known since childhood as Kip, had his 52nd birthday a week or so ago. And my newest grandchild, Jamie's son, Wiley, is already 8 months old, an age I find much more entertaining and pleasant and meaningful than most. A few days ago, I ran across a clipping, which I am enclosing, of an interview written by young Paul Barwick in the Goldsboro News Argus, July 26, 1951. It sent me off into a spasm of memories, which, with your kind permission, I would like to share with you. In that summer of 51, Kip was 6, Stephen was 4 and a half, and Penny was 3. Took them down to Mount Olive to see their grandmother, who, with her parents, was living in the beat-up little old house on 401 East Main Street. Lum Jernigan was then almost 81, still quite alert, but getting hard of hearing. And his chief occupation was looking after my grandmother, Lou. Her maiden name was Sarah Lavinia Sanderson, and she had been a month or so short of 16 when he married her. He'd always been fond of joking about having taken her to raise. Now she was 75, quite far gone, with what appears to have been Alzheimer's disease. And he looked after her with great care and tenderness. When we had been there for 2 or 3 days, I was sitting out back under the trees when she wandered out and sat down in the chair next to mine, very quiet as always. Finally, she asked me, who do all these youngins belong to? I told her, oh, they're mine, Grandma. She thought that over for a while, nodding, and said, well, who are you? The children were fascinated by everything around them. The house, all that empty open space beneath it, the yard, gardens and outbuildings, my mother's chickens, the cemetery, the big ditch, the language and customs of the natives, and above all, my grandfather Jeremy. At one point, he decided they needed a swing in the yard, and he sent all of us off to Simmons Hardware for 20 feet of plow line. He deftly tossed one end of the plow line over a tall branch of a pecan tree. Selecting just the right length of board from his stash, he deftly trimmed it down to the right size and shape for a swing seat, using only a hatchet for the task. Up to then, I had regarded a hatchet only as a tool for chopping, but Lum Jernigan and his hatchet went after that board like they were peeling an apple, quickly, easily, and with great grace and skill. Kip at that time was scheduled to start school in a couple of months and was jumping the gun by learning a little reading and writing on the sly. He carried around a little shirt pocket notebook in which he collected people's names and birth dates. In Mount Olive, though, in the routine of taking inventory of them 3 or 4 times a day, he ran across one that obviously did not belong there, nor anywhere else for that matter. The entry read, Christopher Columbus Jernigan, October 1st, 1870. The name itself was preposterous, And the real Columbus's date was not 1850, but 1492, like the song. He finally came to me for elucidation. I explained that was the name of Lone Jernigan, which was why his own name was Christopher Hargrove. And hell, Kip, a lot of people live to be 80 years old. He finally accepted it, but he still shook his head every time he ran across it in his periodic inventory check. There was one noteworthy visitor while we were there in the form of a younger brother of my grandfather by the name of Julius Joseph Maxwell Jernigan, age 70. Uncle Jule was a farmer and he wanted everybody to know it. He wore overalls and a straw hat in the summer, drove a pickup truck, and chewed tobacco. We men folk settled down in the shade in the backyard, Kip hovering watchfully at his elbow as Uncle Jule pulled out a plug of his chewing tobacco, cut off a corner of it with his pocket knife, and politely offered the first chew to Kip, who, with equal delicacy, declined it. My grandfather, watching just as solemnly, sighed tenderly in reminiscence. I guess I was just about this boy's age when I started chewing tobacco. Kip gaped and Uncle Jule and I perked up as he continued. It wasn't too long after that before Mama said to Daddy, Sater, Buddy here's getting to be big enough boy to have his own tobacco, instead of stealing yours all the time. So they put me out apprentice to a farmer, paid me 50 cents a week. Uncle Jule sighed. I expect 50 cents went a lot further in them days. Yep, said my grandfather. Back then, 50 cents would buy a quart of good whiskey. Uncle Jule laughed. Hell, them days. These days you can't buy a quart of anything for 50 cents. And what you do buy, said Lone solemnly, won't hardly last you till Monday morning. Enough of all this wool gathering. Have yourself an uncommonly good year and a spectacular centennial celebration to get you in the mood for the next year. Take care and give my love to everyone. Cordially yours, Marion Hargrove.
Thank you, everybody. That was wonderful. And I had a blast listening to all of that. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Thank you all for coming, and I hope everybody has a wonderful night.